Prince Harry had survived public humiliation, family separation, and years of bitter distance from the institution that once defined him. But nothing prepared him for the quiet cruelty of discovering that his name had disappeared from a committee tied to the one part of royal life he still considered sacred. There was no warning call, no private explanation, only a revised document, a closed palace door, and the unmistakable authority of his own father behind it. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Harry stared at the forwarded email until the words blurred. A military contact had sent the list, believing he already knew. He did not. The Royal Military Honors Committee, an advisory body reviewing ceremonial appointments, honorary affiliations, remembrance duties, and recommendations tied to royal service, now carried every name except his. This was no decorative title. It was one of his last links to an identity earned through active service. He read the document twice, returned to the heading, and searched again. Nothing. Meghan entered, saw his expression, and stopped. Harry turned the screen toward her, pressed his thumb against its corner, and said the palace had removed the final role that felt earned rather than inherited. She understood. Instantly, this loss touched comradeship, sacrifice, veterans, and the years when he had felt useful without relying on the crown. The authorization code made the decision colder. It came directly from the king's office, proving no junior aide had made an error. Charles had approved the structure after consulting William and military advisors. The seat was not vacant. Edward had already been chosen, his expanding ceremonial duties making him the palace's symbol of dependable service. That speed exposed the truth. The change had been planned long before Harry discovered it. Charles closed the committee folder at Clarence House and set down his pen. Camilla watched him, then asked whether his son had been told. The king looked toward the window and answered that direct notice would invite another argument. She remained silent, but the warning was clear. By avoiding confrontation, the monarch had created a deeper wound. Harry refused to contact the press. He requested a private conversation with his father, still hoping for an explanation he could understand. What he did not know was that Charles had already prepared for the call and decided what he would refuse to discuss. Harry could accept losing a title, a uniform, even a place on a balcony. But before he surrendered the last piece of his military identity, he needed to know why his father had chosen silence over honesty. To the palace, the committee seat was a line on an organizational chart. To Harry, it carried the dust of Afghanistan, the memory of comrades, and the pride of a life he had built beyond palace walls. Charles understood that history. He also understood the danger of allowing personal emotion to shape royal authority. Between them stood a uniform Harry could no longer wear, and a question neither man had ever answered without reopening an older wound. Harry remembered the military as the first place where birth could not do the work for him. Rank had to be earned through discipline, courage, and responsibility. Shared danger gave him something palace life never had, an identity separate from being the king's younger son. That was why the committee mattered. It kept him connected to veterans, remembrance events, and the traditions he believed no family dispute could erase. Meghan listened as he admitted the removal felt different from losing patronages or ceremonial duties. Those roles had belonged to the institution. His service belonged to him. She watched his anger soften into grief as he said Charles was not merely closing a door. His father was rewriting the one chapter of his life Harry believed the palace could never diminish. Meghan reminded him that no document could cancel what he had earned, but he answered that institutions decide what the public is allowed to remember. Charles carried that same truth like a weight. Camilla found him rereading an old briefing on Harry's operational service, a formal record describing duties performed during deployment. The king placed one hand over the page but did not close it. He told her his son had shown courage when courage was demanded. Yet bravery in uniform could not settle questions of trust inside the monarchy. Camilla heard the guilt beneath the logic, and he knew she had. William entered for a scheduled briefing and noticed the service record. The prince warned that Harry would see the decision as punishment, whatever official explanation followed. Charles answered that interpretation could not become authority. Yet William had already been consulted on the revised committee and had not objected. His silence would cut deeply because the brothers had once stood together at military commemorations, honoring service with one voice. Edward received his appointment without celebration. He asked a palace secretary whether Harry had stepped aside voluntarily. When told the king had ordered the change, he folded the letter and said he would accept the duty, but never pretend the circumstances were painless. Then one phrase surfaced in a confidential advisor's note. The breakdown during the remembrance review. Charles had called that encounter the moment continued membership became impossible. The committee document explained who had been removed, but buried inside palace memory was the confrontation that explained why Charles had finally acted. The removal did not begin with a signature. It began months earlier, behind the closed doors of a planning room, where remembrance, protocol, and family resentment collided. What should have been a routine discussion about honoring fallen service members became a brutal test of loyalty. One sentence from Harry changed the atmosphere. One response from William hardened it. And when Charles heard the recorded account of that meeting, the king reached a conclusion he would keep hidden until the committee list was rewritten. Harry joined the Windsor Remembrance Review through a secure video connection, while William, Edward, and military officials attended in person. The review was a private session deciding royal representation at the National Service of Military Reflection, a ceremony honoring fallen personnel. Every approved appearance carried the crown's authority, so one message could blur personal service and official representation. Harry argued that combat experience and years supporting wounded veterans gave him a voice beyond royal status. He asked to deliver a recorded message. William answered carefully, but the boundary was firm. The prince said committee approval would make the contribution appear royally authorized, even if the speaker no longer represented the institution. Tension snapped. Harry accused the palace of using protocol to erase his service, while relatives without combat experience inherited visibility. He asked whether loyalty to the monarchy mattered more than loyalty to those who wore the uniform. Edward tried to steady the exchange, yet the Duke removed his earpiece and told William the palace had confused obedience with honor. William pushed back his chair. He answered that a confidential committee could not survive if every disagreement became public family conflict. Edward insisted nobody questioned Harry's courage, but the reassurance came too late. The future king defended the institution, and his brother heard rejection. Charles received the documented account that evening. The committee secretary had prepared a formal transcript, meaning a written record of the exchange for the sovereign's review. The king stopped at Harry's declaration that the palace had no moral ownership over military sacrifice. Then another warning arrived. One disputed detail surfaced during Harry's private conversation with a veterans organizer. It never reached the press, but Charles learned confidential information had traveled beyond the room. He immediately ordered a review of whether a non-working relative should remain, and requested a replacement structure. Harry finally understood. His removal had been decided months before the list changed. He contacted Charles and demanded a meeting without aides, advisors, or written statements. The confrontation Harry had wanted during the review had been delayed, formalized, and buried. But now father and son would finally face each other without a committee table to keep them apart. When Harry entered the private room, Charles was already standing. There were no uniformed aides, no prepared statement, and no family member waiting to soften the collision. For several seconds, neither man moved toward the other. Then Harry placed the revised committee list on the table and asked the question that had followed him across every mile of distance. Why had his father allowed him to discover the decision from someone else? Harry had requested this meeting without aides or private secretaries. Every earlier exchange had been filtered through palace procedure. Now nothing stood between father and son except the paper and years of injury. Charles began with the institution. The Royal Military Honors Committee, a body advising the monarch on ceremonial appointments and military recognition, demanded participation, confidentiality, and alignment. Harry lived abroad and no longer performed working duties. He called continued membership unworkable. Harry rejected the language. He pushed the list toward his father and said availability could have been discussed, confidentiality reviewed, expectations rewritten. Removing his name had been a choice. Then his voice dropped. You took the only honor I had left that I did not receive simply because I was born your son. Charles flinched but stayed silent. The accusation exposed the divide between royal symbolism and service earned under danger. He opened the Remembrance Review transcript, a written account, and pointed to the passage concerning trust. Harry reached for it. The king placed his palm over the page and closed the folder. That gesture changed everything. Charles was no longer explaining. He was defending a boundary. Harry asked whether William had demanded the removal. His father answered that the prince had not requested it, but supported rebuilding the committee around working royals. Harry heard one truth. His brother had known and remained silent. Charles admitted the deeper fear. The committee could not become another arena where unresolved family pain shaped official remembrance. He did not question Harry's sincerity. He questioned whether his son could separate personal injury from institutional responsibility. Harry accused him of choosing the crown whenever family became difficult. Charles answered that a sovereign sometimes accepted blame from those he loved rather than weaken what he had sworn to protect. His voice cracked once. Harry noticed. Harry stood and asked whether his years of service meant anything inside the palace. Charles said they meant more than any committee could represent, but the decision would stand. His son left the document behind. The king remained alone beside it. The meeting settled the decision, but deepened the wound. Because Harry now understood that no missing signature or careless aid stood behind his removal. The full weight of the crown did. Royal decisions rarely arrive as dramatic decrees. They travel through discreet consultations, handwritten amendments, and conversations designed to leave no fingerprints of emotion. Harry's removal followed that pattern. Yet behind every formal sentence stood a person choosing which risk mattered more: alienating a wounded son or weakening a system built on obedience. Charles held the final authority, but William, Edward, Camilla, and senior advisors each faced a private moment when silence became a form of participation. Charles ordered a restricted review after the Windsor Remembrance Review exposed deep distrust. The assessment examined attendance, confidentiality, ceremonial responsibility, location, and whether each member still represented the working monarchy. The Royal Military Honors Committee existed through sovereign authorization, meaning the king could change its membership without parliament or a public hearing. It advised the monarch, but it could never overrule him. Charles studied the proposed list and drew a line beneath Harry's name rather than through it. His private secretary waited. The king then asked how long an inactive advisory position could remain before the arrangement became dishonest. That question revealed the real pressure. Harry still carried military credibility, but he no longer performed the official duties required to speak within the crown's confidential structure. Camilla challenged the method, not the decision. She warned that allowing Harry to discover the removal indirectly would turn administration into humiliation. Charles answered that an early call would create pressure to negotiate something already settled. The Queen Consort remained uneasy, and he knew she was right about the emotional cost. William supported a smaller committee built around working royals, yet the prince asked that his brother receive a personal explanation. Charles promised to handle it after the revision. The future king accepted that assurance, then regretted his silence when Harry learned through another source. One rejected draft offered Harry a non-voting veterans liaison role, a position preserving his experience while blocking access to confidential appointments. Charles refused it because the title carried no clear constitutional duty. Edward had not sought the replacement seat either. During a private audience, he told the king he did not want Harry believing he had profited from exclusion. The monarch replied that service had to continue through whoever remained available. Charles signed the revised warrant, the formal document confirming the committee's powers and members. After everyone left, he folded the rejected liaison proposal and locked it away. What had been contained inside one royal document was about to reach the people who knew Harry not as a prince, but as a soldier. and their reactions would make silence impossible to maintain. The first consequence did not arrive through a headline. It appeared as an empty place at a military planning table, where Harry's name had once been printed beside upcoming remembrance initiatives. No one announced the symbolism, yet everyone understood it. The palace had not only removed him from a committee, it had redirected conversations, relationships, and responsibilities that had allowed him to believe part of his former life remained untouched. Harry felt the change before any announcement. Military charities and regimental offices received updated palace guidance directing committee correspondence to Edward and William. His secure briefing access ended, consultations moved elsewhere, and direct messages disappeared into another royal office. The official explanation remained restrained. Membership had been revised to match current duties and ceremonial commitments. Harry joined an online meeting with veterans connected to one of his long-term projects and noticed a royal remembrance initiative missing from his briefing pack. A former officer hesitated, then explained that new palace instructions prevented committee matters from being discussed with him. The Duke forced a smile and told everyone to continue without apology. Meghan waited until the call ended. Harry closed the laptop but did not move. She placed a hand on his shoulder, and he admitted that hearing the boundary from veterans hurt more than reading it in a palace document. The paper had felt cold. This felt personal. Edward entered his first committee session without triumph. Harry's old name card had been removed, yet a faint indentation remained in the leather folder. He paused before sitting, and later asked that no briefing describe the change as a promotion. The new member would perform the duty, but he refused to celebrate another man's exclusion. Pressure began quietly. Several former officers questioned why limited availability required total removal rather than a non-voting role, a position allowing advice without final authority. One retired commander contacted the palace and warned that the decision might be institutionally defensible, but emotionally damaging to military communities that identified with Harry. Advisors prepared a forceful response, accusing the Crown of degrading his service. Harry rejected it. He told Meghan he would not turn veterans into weapons in another family battle. Charles received that refusal in a written briefing. The king reread the sentence and asked why his son had stayed silent. When told Harry wanted military causes protected, his certainty shifted at that moment. Charles then asked William whether his brother might accept a private conversation about shared military memories. The prince doubted it, but agreed to carry the message. For the first time since the removal, the next step would not be carried by a warrant, an advisor, or an official statement. It would pass directly from one brother to another. William did not call as heir to the throne, and Harry did not answer as the estranged spare. For one private conversation, there were no advisors shaping language, and no officials recording outcomes. There were only two brothers carrying years of accusation into a silence neither knew how to break. The committee remained unchanged. The betrayal remained real. Yet something shifted when William finally admitted the one truth Harry had needed to hear from the beginning. William contacted his brother directly and asked for a private video call. No private secretaries joined, no formal summary would be filed, and both men agreed that nothing said would pass through representatives. That mattered, because every recent exchange had arrived filtered through offices, statements, and defensive language. This time, the brothers would own every word. William explained that he had supported a committee made up of active working royals. The body advised on honors issued in the sovereign's name, meaning official recognition granted through the monarch's authority, so its members had to carry current duties. The prince insisted that the decision had never been meant to question Harry's military service or his commitment to veterans. Harry did not let him hide inside principle. He asked why no warning had come. Disagreement would have hurt, he said, but silence felt worse. It was as if William had watched a door close and chosen not to call out before it locked. William accepted the blow. He admitted that he knew restructuring was coming and believed Charles would speak first. When that conversation failed to happen, the future king remained silent because he feared another family dispute becoming public. Harry leaned back and folded his arms. Then William said, "I should have called you before the paper reached anyone else." The words restored nothing, yet they changed the air. William then delivered Charles's message through that private conversation. The king wanted another discussion, not to reverse the decision, but to protect Harry's independent veteran's work, and recognize his service without implying current royal authority. Harry rejected any decorative consolation role. Still, he agreed to discuss a clear separation between crown-controlled honors and independent veteran advocacy, provided the palace respected both. William accepted that his brother's service must never be diminished. Harry admitted committee membership carried constitutional expectations he could no longer meet. Together, they drafted 3 principles for Charles: no reversal, no public degradation, and no use of veterans in retaliation against either of the brothers. The committee seat was gone, but the brothers had created something palace procedure had failed to provide: a truthful language for loss that Charles could either accept or reject before the world delivered its own verdict. By the time the palace confirmed the change, the private wound had become a national argument about service, duty, and belonging. Some saw a sovereign restoring discipline to an institution Harry had left behind. Others saw a father erasing a soldier because the son had refused to remain obedient. The debate spread beyond royal commentators when one newspaper placed a single abandoned military chair across its front page, and beneath it printed 4 words that captured the country's division. The palace confirmed that Harry no longer served on the Royal Military Honors Committee, and that Edward had joined the revised body. The committee was the group advising the monarch on ceremonial military appointments and official recognition. Its statement stressed working responsibilities, yet avoided the remembrance review and Charles's private confrontation with his son. Britain divided quickly. Supporters of the king argued that confidential royal work required active crown service. Defenders of Harry answered that battlefield duty carried moral weight beyond palace employment and deserved a carefully limited advisory connection. The National Chronicle sharpened that conflict. Its morning front page showed an empty chair beside a ceremonial military cap beneath the words, "Service without a seat." Commuters outside Victoria Station held the paper, while broadcasters repeated the image across their reports. Veterans gathered near the Long Walk at Windsor Castle, but they did not protest against the monarchy. They placed 2 wreaths together, one honoring the crown, the other recognizing Harry's service. That quiet act became more powerful than anger, because it refused to choose between duty and sacrifice. Edward faced the question after a military engagement. When a reporter asked whether he had replaced Harry, he stopped and said, "Service should never become a competition between brothers." His answer denied the palace any easy celebration. Harry watched the wreaths during a televised report. Meghan noticed his unease, and he admitted he had never wanted veterans forced to choose between supporting him and respecting the sovereign. She reminded him that the public was responding to silence, not asking for revenge. Charles faced pressure to say nothing. Advisors warned that personal recognition might weaken the decision. William presented the 3 principles agreed with Harry and argued that firmness did not require humiliation. The king removed a sentence, stressing his son's ineligibility. He replaced it with language honoring Harry's combat service and independent work with veterans. Then Charles recorded a private message for him. The world had judged the removal as either discipline or cruelty, but the final meaning would be decided by what Charles said when no committee, headline, or crown stood between father and son. Charles did not restore Harry to the committee. Harry did not pretend the removal no longer hurt. There was no dramatic reunion and no sudden healing of every fracture between them. Instead, the conflict ended with something rarer inside royal life: a boundary acknowledged without a life being erased. The king kept control of the institution. The son kept ownership of his service. And both men finally understood that authority could remove a position, but it could not rewrite sacrifice. Harry remained outside the Royal Military Honors Committee, while Edward continued in the reassigned seat. The committee advised the sovereign on ceremonial appointments and official recognition. Charles refused to reverse the warrant, the formal document confirming its authority, because active positions had to remain with people carrying crown duties. The palace revised its statement to honor Harry's record and veterans' work. That mattered because removal no longer sounded like a judgment on his courage. Service earned in uniform was separated from authority granted by the monarchy. Harry listened alone to a recorded message from his father. Charles said he had acted as sovereign, but regretted allowing his son to learn through another person. The king admitted that the method had turned a constitutional boundary into a personal injury. Harry answered in a recorded reply. He did not ask to return. He rejected how the decision had been handled, yet accepted that royal authority and independent service must follow separate paths. Neither path, he insisted, should diminish the other. Charles agreed. He offered no title or consolation. By refusing to cover the loss with another palace role, the monarch recognized that Harry's military identity existed beyond royal permission. William confirmed, through a call, that future statements would never question his brother's commitment to veterans. The prince's admission could not erase their division, but it created honesty where silence had ruled. Edward entered the next committee meeting without celebrating. He asked members to recognize royal family members who had served in uniform. Continuity, he made clear, did not require forgetting. For Harry, the episode ended the belief that he could retain royal authority while living outside its duties. For Charles, it proved that control without candor could turn necessary boundaries into lasting wounds. The monarchy became more defined, but also more aware of quiet exclusion. The chair remained occupied by another man, the committee continued without Harry, and the palace doors stayed guarded by duty. But the honor he had earned in uniform remained his, beyond the reach of committees, titles, and even the king. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.